The colossal chamber of the Zalosian Grand Conclave pulsed with a low, resonant thrum, a sound woven into the very fabric of its ancient, living architecture. Spanning leagues beneath a simulated twilight sky, it was a testament to millennia of galactic order, its polished obsidian floor reflecting the shimmering data glyphs that cascaded down immense, crystalline pillars. Each pillar, a conduit of information and authority, terminated in a seating platform for a high-ranking delegate, positions etched by countless cycles of political maneuvering and species ascendancy. The air, typically thick with the measured exhalations of diverse biologies and the hum of countless translating nodes, was now a charged void, silent save for the ragged whispers of 1,000 species. The primary projection, a hollow tank of impossible scale at the chamber's heart, displayed not the usual diplomatic overtures or trade negotiations, but a single, terrifying anomaly. A crude, blocky vessel designated Humanity, Probe 7, static against the vibrant energy signatures of what remained of the Kalan barrier reconnaissance fleet. On the floor of the conclave, beneath the shadowed arch of the High Elder's dais, Subconsul Valera of the Vicar hammered a chitinous fist against the arm of his seat, a sound like a distant cannon shot echoing through the sudden quiet. His multiple ocular stalks, usually shifting with predatory grace, were locked onto the image, radiating pure, unadulterated fury. "Impossible," Valera hissed, his voice a gravelly rasp, magnified and translated across the vast space. "This is a fabrication, a trick. No single entity, no single ship could achieve such a feat against a full reconnaissance group, let alone disable them with such surgical precision. Our sensors must be compromised, our data corrupted." The Vicar, a species forged in the crucible of endless internecine conflicts, understood only overwhelming force and definitive destruction. The concept of incapacitation without annihilation was an alien concept, one that deeply unsettled their martial doctrines. For them, a battle ended when the enemy was ash. This was something else. High Elder Thuron, his 6 segmented limbs resting lightly on the polished control surfaces of his dais, exhaled a sigh of chemical vapor that momentarily clouded the air around his head crest. His species, the Xylos, had overseen the fragile peace of this quadrant for cycles beyond count, and their wisdom was etched into the very stones of the conclave. He had witnessed countless threats, weathered political storms that would shatter younger species, but never had he encountered a paradox so profoundly unsettling. "The data has been independently verified, Subconsul, by Eldrin astronomical observatories, by Cathar tactical analysis nodes, and by our own deep scan telemetry. Every sensor reading, every energy signature, every microgravitational fluctuation, they all corroborate. One human vessel, one pilot. Engaged, neutralized, and then maintained position, utterly silent for 3 full cycles." Thuron's voice, a melodic, multitonal vibration, carried a weight that even Valera could not entirely dismiss, though the Vicar's frustration continued to radiate from his hunched form. The implications were vast, terrifying, and utterly without precedent. Their understanding of space combat, of strategic advantage, of the very limits of physical possibility, had been shattered by a single, inexplicable event. Ambassador Rylos of the Eldrin, a species of ethereal, shimmering beings whose forms coalesced from light and energy, floated serenely above his platform, his voice a soft, harmonic hum that nevertheless commanded attention. "The term neutralized, High Elder, is itself a point of contention. Our initial reports indicated catastrophic energy fluctuations, structural integrity breaches, and propulsion failures across the Zalosian fleet. Yet no loss of life. No critical breaches of life support. It is as if the human vessel sought not to destroy, but to disarm, to render inert." Rylos's observations, always nuanced, often unnerving in their clarity, deepened the mystery. The Eldrin, with their profound connection to the cosmic energies and their long-developed empathy, perceived the universe through a lens of interconnectedness. This human action, while aggressive, held an element of deliberate restraint that defied the brutality of typical first contacts. They had expected an unbridled, primitive rage or a calculated, cold extermination. Instead, they had received an enigma. "Restraint," scoffed Senator Gorak of the Cathar, a burly, four-armed biped whose species were renowned for their engineering prowess and pragmatic, often cynical outlook. "Or simply a display of unimaginable power, to disable an entire fleet with such ease, without expending excessive energy, without a single retaliatory strike even registering on the human vessel's defensive shields. That is not restraint, Ambassador. That is a declaration, a demonstration, a warning of what they could do if they so chose. Gorok's multiple eyes blinked rapidly, his fur bristling with anxiety. The Cathar were a species that valued clear data and predictable outcomes. This human event was neither. It was a statistical impossibility, a deviation from every known law of physics and strategy. Their entire defensive matrix, painstakingly built over generations, suddenly felt irrelevant. The conclave descended back into a low murmur, a collective exhalation of fear and confusion. The image of the silent human vessel, dwarfed by the damaged hulks of Zalosian ships yet somehow radiating an immense, unseen power, seemed to mock their advanced understanding. Humanity, a species recently detected on the galactic periphery, barely within the acceptable range for observation protocols, had always been categorized as emergent type III. Their crude FTL drives, their nascent energy weapons, their internal conflicts all pointed to a species still struggling with its own planetary confines. Now that categorization felt like a cruel joke. Their entire understanding of galactic power dynamics, painstakingly constructed over millennia, felt suddenly fragile like glass before a hammer blow. The unknown variable, the unpredictable element, humanity. High Elder Thuron's internal processors whirred, analyzing countless data streams, cross-referencing historical archives of first contacts, searching for any parallel, any precedent. There was none. Every known species upon encountering a superior force either fled in terror, surrendered, or fought with desperate, suicidal ferocity. This human had done none of those. It had engaged with a precision and effectiveness that defied conventional understanding, and then simply waited. What did that mean? What was the intent behind such an action? Was it a challenge, a plea, or something far more unsettling, a display of power so profound that explanations were deemed unnecessary? The silence from the human vessel was the most unnerving aspect. It was not the silence of fear nor of retreat. It was the silence of absolute, unwavering confidence. We have sent a standard diplomatic hail, repeated over multiple frequencies, using every known common language and mathematical construct, Thuron announced, his voice slicing through the cacophony of whispers. No response, not even an acknowledgement of reception. Then they ignore our protocols, Valera roared, pushing himself to a standing position, his chitinous armor clattering. They show contempt for galactic law. This is an act of war, High Elder, an unprovoked assault on a sovereign Zalosian fleet. We must retaliate. We must send a punitive force. Show them the true might of the conclave before this anomaly becomes an epidemic. The Vikar were pragmatic in their brutality. They believed in swift, decisive action, lest weakness be perceived and exploited. Their history was replete with examples of species that hesitated and were subsequently annihilated. For Velara, the human silence was an insult demanding immediate, overwhelming retribution. Rylos projected a shimmering image of the Kalan barrier, a strategic choke point at the edge of Zalosian space. Consider the tactical implications, subconsul. Our vessels were engaged within the established safety parameters for reconnaissance. They were not encroaching on human-claimed territory. And yet, this human pilot, operating alone, demonstrated capabilities that rendered our best defensive technologies moot. To send a punitive force, without understanding the nature of this threat, without comprehending the full spectrum of their capabilities, would be an act of profound folly. We could very well be walking into a trap of unimaginable proportions. What if this single pilot, this single vessel, is merely an advance scout? What if their full military strength dwarfs our own, and this was merely a test? The Eldrin's soft voice carried the chilling weight of logical deduction. The thought sent another shiver through the conclave. The very possibility that this unprecedented display of power was not their maximum effort was a concept too terrible to fully embrace. A test, Gorok muttered, his many eyes scanning the data glyphs projected onto his personal console. Or an outright declaration of superiority. Their technology, the energy signatures recorded from their primary weapon discharge, defy our current understanding of energy manipulation. It wasn't a focused beam, not a projectile, not even a kinetic impact. It was a localized reality distortion, a ripple effect that destabilized every critical system simultaneously. Our scientists are still trying to model the physics. The HAR engineers, the best in the quadrant, were baffled. Their simulations, run at maximum capacity, consistently produced error codes when attempting to replicate the human's combat. Maneuvers, it was like trying to fit a multi-dimensional puzzle piece into a two-dimensional slot. Thuron remained still, absorbing the arguments, the fear, the desperate attempts to rationalize the irrational. The Zalosian philosophy, rooted in balance and long-term stability, dictated that hasty action was often the precursor to catastrophic failure. But inaction, in the face of such an audacious display of power, felt equally dangerous. The political ramifications alone were immense. The conclave, a tapestry of diverse species, each with its own agenda and anxieties, was already showing cracks under the strain of this new, unknown pressure. The whispers now grew louder, evolving into fragmented debates, projected data, and frantic consultations between delegates. "We must understand," Thuron finally stated, his voice ringing with a renewed authority that momentarily quelled the rising panic. "Before we act, before we even conceive of a response, we must understand. This is not merely a tactical engagement. It is a profound philosophical challenge to our very perception of reality. What kind of species commands such power, yet wields it with such unexpected precision? What are their motives, their values, their very definition of existence?" Thuron's gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the varied stares of his fellow delegates. To simply respond with force, without comprehension, would be to invite a conflict that we cannot possibly predict the outcome of. It would be an admission of our own intellectual and strategic failure. Valera scoffed, but held his tongue, his multiple eyes narrowing in frustration. He saw hesitation, weakness, where Thuron saw cautious wisdom. But even he could not deny the chilling logic in Rylos's words. The thought of engaging a species whose very combat doctrine defied known physics was a terrifying prospect, even for the battle-hardened Vikar. "Therefore," Thuron continued, "we will maintain a perimeter, but we will not escalate. We will continue our attempts at communication, but we will also initiate a deeper, more granular analysis of all available human data, from their nascent radio transmissions to their primitive orbital mechanics. We will scour every fragment of information, every cultural artifact, every digital whisper they have inadvertently broadcast into the cosmos. We must understand the human before we can hope to interact with them, let alone stand against them." He paused, his gaze returning to the silent human vessel on the holotank. "This anomaly has rewritten the laws of space combat. Our first task before we write a new chapter is to read the pages of theirs." A cold, calculating fear settled over the conclave. The fight, they knew, had just begun, not with weapons, but with the terrifying, arduous struggle for comprehension. The weeks that followed were a maelstrom of frantic data analysis within the Zalosian hegemony. Every available sensor, every computational node, every linguistic and cultural expert was directed toward the human species. The sheer volume of raw data was staggering, centuries of undirected transmissions, scientific papers, artistic expressions, historical records. It was a digital ocean, chaotic and contradictory, reflecting a species that seemed to revel in its own inconsistencies. High Elder Thuron spent countless cycles in the main analysis vaults, his multi-limbed form hunched over holographic displays that pulsed with human data. The more they analyzed, the more perplexed they became. Humanity, as a species, presented a paradox. Their history was rife with internal conflict, devastating wars, and social upheavals. Yet, interspersed with this brutality were soaring artistic achievements, profound philosophical inquiries into ethics and morality, and scientific advancements that pushed the boundaries of their own understanding. They were a species of bewildering contradictions, capable of immense cruelty, yet equally capable of extraordinary compassion, driven by self-interest, yet also by self-sacrifice. This duality was confounding to the Zalosians, whose own societal evolution had been a gradual, systematic eradication of internal conflict in favor of collective stability. The incident at the Kalan barrier, therefore, became even more inexplicable within this context. How could a species so prone to internal strife produce a single pilot, a single individual, capable of such a precise, controlled, and utterly devastating display of combat prowess? Was it a rogue element, a genetically engineered super-soldier, or did it represent a hidden potential, a latent capability that defied their chaotic societal presentation? Subconsul Valera, growing increasingly agitated by the lack of a decisive military response, continued to lobby for a show of force. "They mock us with their silence, High Elder. This analysis is a waste of vital cycles. While we decipher their primitive poetry, they could be massing an invasion elite, perfecting new weapons of incomprehensible destructive power. Their internal history suggests aggression is their default state. Why should we assume otherwise now?" He stood before Thuron in a private audience chamber, his posture rigid with impatience. Thuron, weary but unyielding, projected a holographic representation of the Kalan barrier incident, slowed to a microsecond scale. Observe, subconsul. The human vessel designation Aris Thorn, after its pilot, engaged our forces from a statistically impossible range. Its energy profile remained flat, almost dormant, until the precise moment of engagement. There was no charge-up, no detectable weapon deployment. Instead, our sensors registered a localized quantum entanglement event, a brief, hyper-focused manipulation of the very fabric of spacetime around each of our ships. Thuron paused, letting the implications sink in. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a correction of reality, a localized, controlled entropy reversal around critical systems. Our shields were not broken. They were momentarily rendered non-existent. Our propulsion was not damaged. It was temporarily disjoined from its own causal chain. Valera recoiled slightly, a low guttural sound escaping his multi-jointed throat. Such a thing is theoretical, High Elder. Energy manipulation at that scale with that precision requires a power source we cannot even conceptualize, and to do so to multiple targets simultaneously in the chaotic environment of a skirmish. It's a fairy tale for hatchlings. And yet the data persists, Thuron countered, his voice steady. Our scientists, led by the Eldrin, are hypothesizing that the human vessel is powered in the way we understand it. It might be drawing upon ambient zero-point energy, or perhaps, as one radical theory suggests, manipulating the energy density of localized vacuum fluctuations. Their ship is less a vehicle and more a focused field generator. Projected another image, this one of human anatomical scans, retrieved from historical medical databases. And the pilot, Aris Thorn, appears to be an ordinary human. No visible implants, no genetic alterations beyond what their species typically performs for health and longevity. How does an ordinary biological entity interface with such technology? How does it possess the cognitive capacity to orchestrate such a complex, multi-layered reality manipulation in real time? This was the core of the mystery. The technology, however advanced, was only part of the enigma. The human operating it was the true unknown. The Eldrin, with their inherent understanding of subtle energies, were particularly fascinated. Ambassador Rylos, in his own reports to Thuron, spoke of the human mind as a nexus of unexpected potential, a chaotic but incredibly adaptable processing unit. He suggested that perhaps the very disorder of human thought, its capacity for intuition, for creative leaps beyond linear logic, was what allowed them to interface with such advanced principles. After several more cycles of intense, fruitless analysis and under growing pressure from various factions within the conclave, Thuron made a decision that surprised even Rylos. "We will attempt direct personal contact," he declared during an emergency session. "Not a formal diplomatic delegation with a fleet escort. Too aggressive, too likely to provoke. We will send a single unarmed vessel. A small exploratory craft, bearing a direct, unencrypted message. A request for dialogue, personal and unescorted, from the High Elder of the Zalosian hegemony to the pilot known as Aris Thorn." Valera was incandescent. "This is madness, High Elder. You send a single, vulnerable vessel into the maw of an unknown predator. You invite them to strike again to demonstrate their contempt once more. This is not diplomacy. It is an act of appeasement, a sign of weakness." "It is a calculated risk, subconsul," Thuron stated, his multifaceted eyes locking onto Valera's. "If they are truly as powerful as their actions suggest, then a fleet will not deter them. If they are hostile, a single vessel is a negligible loss. But if they are something else entirely, then this gesture of trust, this unprecedented humility, might be the only path to understanding. We present ourselves not as an empire, but as individuals seeking answers." Senator Gorak, surprisingly, remained silent. He understood the logic of desperation. If their conventional methods of deterrence and intelligence gathering were useless, then unconventional methods were the only recourse. The Cathar, while wary, were also profoundly curious. The data anomaly was too compelling to ignore. A small, sleek Zalosian scout ship, its diplomatic pennants fluttering in the vacuum of space, detached from the perimeter and began its slow, deliberate approach towards the stationary human vessel. On board, a single Zalosian envoy, a younger, highly specialized Plamet named Kalar, known for his linguistic prowess and psychological resilience, prepared himself. His mission was simple: make contact. His fear, however, was profound. He was flying directly into the heart of the enigma. Days passed in agonizing silence. The conclave watched, captivated and terrified, as the Zalosian scout approached, its status beacon a solitary pulse in the vastness. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Kalar's message arrived. It was not a message of attack nor of surrender. It was a recording, a live feed from the interior of his scout ship, projected onto the conclave's central holotank. The image was grainy, distorted by proximity to the human vessel's strange energy field, but undeniably clear. Kalar stood before his comms console, his form rigid, his multi-jointed limbs trembling slightly. Opposite him, occupying the smaller diplomatic projection field, was the image of a human, male, hairless head, eyes that seemed to hold an ancient, unsettling calm. This was Eris Thorn. Thorn's voice, translated into the Zalosian harmonic, was slow, measured, and utterly devoid of aggression. "Greetings, Envoy Kalar of the Zalosian hegemony. We have received your message. Your request for dialogue is acknowledged. I am Captain Eris Thorn, pilot of the vessel designated Pathfinder, and I welcome your outreach." His posture was relaxed, almost casual, a stark contrast to Kalar's visible tension. The effect was profoundly unsettling to the watching conclave. It was not the posture of a conqueror, nor a cowering supplicant. It was the posture of an equal meeting a peer. Kalar, recovering his composure, began the formal diplomatic opening. "Captain Thorn, your actions at the Kalan barrier caused significant distress and confusion within the conclave. Your engagement with a Zalosian reconnaissance fleet, resulting in the incapacitation of multiple vessels, was an unprecedented act. We seek an explanation for this engagement." Thorn's eyes, magnified on the holotank, seemed to pierce through the vastness of space and time, directly into the collective consciousness of the conclave. "Envoy, the engagement was a defensive measure. Our mission, a long-range survey of uncharted nebulae, was interrupted by your fleet's aggressive maneuvers. Despite our attempts to communicate our peaceful intent, your vessels initiated a lock-on sequence and began accelerating towards our position, violating standard non-aggression protocols. My actions were a necessary response to protect my vessel and its classified cargo." His voice was calm, almost academic, as if describing a routine scientific experiment rather than a battle that had shattered galactic order. Valera, watching from the conclave, scoffed. "Aggressive maneuvers? Our reconnaissance vessels were merely patrolling their designated quadrant. This human lies." But Thuron, listening intently, felt a cold dread. Thorn's words were too precise, too logical. The Zalosian reconnaissance fleet had been operating under strict orders to investigate any unknown vessels aggressively. It was standard protocol for uncharted space. But for a species to perceive that as a direct threat and to respond with such overwhelming, yet non-lethal, force, it was a paradigm shift. "Classified cargo?" Kalar pressed, his voice betraying a hint of his species' inherent suspicion. "What cargo requires such extreme measures for its protection, Captain?" Thorn's gaze remained steady. "The cargo is of immense scientific and ethical importance to humanity. It involves the preservation of unique biological samples from a newly discovered, rapidly decaying exoplanet, a planet facing an imminent stellar collapse. Our mission was a desperate, last-minute rescue operation. Any delay, any engagement that compromised our vessel's integrity would have resulted in the irreversible loss of invaluable life forms. My priority was the successful extraction and transport of these samples." A ripple of murmurs, this time of surprise, not fear, spread through the conclave. A rescue mission? For alien life forms on a decaying world? This was not the behavior of a predatory species. It was the behavior of custodians. "You claim your actions were defensive," Kalar continued, his voice now tinged with a flicker of awe. "Yet the methods you employed, they defy our understanding of physics. Our ships were not destroyed, but utterly disabled. How did you achieve such an effect?" Thorn paused, and for the first time, a subtle shift occurred in his demeanor, a hint of something akin to pedagogical patience. "Envoy, your understanding of energy and causality, while advanced, is based on a foundational assumption that discrete forces act upon discrete objects. Humanity, through millennia of rigorous scientific inquiry, has developed a more integrated understanding. We perceive space, time, and matter not as separate entities, but as interconnected facets of a single, fluid, energetic continuum. What you refer to as weapons are, for us, instruments of precise environmental manipulation." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. "The laws of space combat you speak of are predicated on the notion of applying force. We, however, operate on the principle of coherence. We do not strike. We introduce specific, localized quantum instabilities. We create a momentary disharmony in the energetic signature of a targeted system, causing its operational parameters to unravel. It is akin to subtly altering the resonant frequency of a complex instrument. It does not break, but it can no longer produce sound. Your ships were not damaged. Their internal coherence was temporarily disrupted. It is a non-destructive method of achieving strategic incapacitation, minimizing collateral damage and preserving life while ensuring mission success. Silence, deep and absolute, descended upon the Grand Conclave. The words translated and projected resonated with a profound, almost spiritual weight. Coherence, quantum instabilities, environmental manipulation. This was not just a new weapon, it was an entirely new philosophical approach to warfare rooted in a completely different understanding of the universe. The implications were staggering. It wasn't just about how they fought, it was about how they thought. Valera stood utterly still, his earlier bluster replaced by a chilling realization. This was not the brute force he understood. This was something far more insidious, far more terrifying in its intellectual superiority. If they didn't break things but merely unmade them, what hope did conventional defenses have? Rylos, however, radiated a soft, pulsing light, a sign of deep contemplation. A non-destructive method, a preservation of life. This aligns with your claim of a rescue mission, Captain Thorne. Your actions, while aggressive, appear to be ethically consistent with your stated intent. Thorne inclined his head slightly. Indeed, Ambassador, humanity's guiding principle in all interstellar interactions is the preservation of life and the acquisition of knowledge. Conflict is a last resort, and when unavoidable, it is conducted with the absolute minimum of destructive force. We believe that every species, every life form, holds intrinsic value within the cosmic tapestry. Kalar, emboldened by the openness, ventured further. Captain, your vessel, the Pathfinder, appears unremarkable, yet its capabilities are beyond anything we have ever encountered. Is this a common technology for humanity, or are you an exceptional case? A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Thorne's lips. Envoy, the Pathfinder, is a standard-issue long-range exploration vessel. Its capabilities are an integrated extension of humanity's understanding of fundamental physics. The principles I utilized in the engagement are taught to all our deep space pilots. What you witnessed was not an anomaly, but a standard application of human operational doctrine. We do not field weapons in the conventional sense. We engineer vessels that operate in harmony with the universe's underlying structure. My skill is merely the application of that knowledge. Another collective gasp rippled through the conclave. Standard issue. All deep space pilots. The sheer scale of the reveal was almost incomprehensible. Humanity wasn't a rogue element with a single superweapon. They were an entire civilization operating on a fundamentally different, vastly more advanced understanding of reality. Their initial underestimation of this species, based on their chaotic social history, suddenly felt like an act of profound ignorance. They had looked at the ripples on the surface and failed to see the immense, silent depths beneath. High Elder Thuron rose from his dais, his multi-limbed form radiating a quiet authority that transcended the fear and confusion. Captain Thorne, he addressed the projection directly, his voice echoing across the chamber, your revelation has shattered our preconceived notions of interstellar interaction. We are humbled by your species' understanding, your philosophy of non-destructive engagement, your dedication to the preservation of life, even in conflict. These are principles that resonate deeply with the Zalosian ethos, albeit on a level we are only now beginning to grasp. He paused, his gaze unblinking. We request a formal diplomatic mission. We wish to understand your species, your technology, your philosophy. We wish to learn. Thorne's smile broadened slightly, a subtle shift that softened his otherwise implacable expression. High Elder Thuron, such a request aligns perfectly with humanity's mission of exploration and understanding. We welcome the opportunity for cultural exchange and scientific collaboration. Our diplomatic envoy will initiate contact and arrange for a meeting at a mutually agreeable neutral zone. We believe that through open dialogue and shared knowledge, all species can bend. The conclave, which had begun in fear and suspicion, now ended in a stunned, almost reverent silence. The human pilot, Aris Thorne, had not just rewritten the laws of space combat. He had, in a single, calm explanation, rewritten the entire galactic script. The fight had indeed begun, but it was not a fight of weapons and destruction. It was a fight for understanding, for adaptation, for a complete reevaluation of everything they thought they knew about the cosmos and their place within it. And humanity, the once underestimated variable, had just unveiled itself as a potential mentor, a challenger to their complacency, and perhaps a beacon towards an unimaginably advanced future. The sheer weight of this realization pressed down on every delegate, a silent, profound understanding that the universe had just become far vaster, far more complex, and far more fascinating than they had ever dared to imagine. The designated neutral zone, a shimmering energy station adrift in the void between Zalosian and human space, became the crucible for a new era. The Zalosians, along with delegates from the Eldrin, Cathar, and even a reluctant contingent from the Vikar, awaited the human diplomatic mission. The initial fear had not entirely dissipated, but it was now tempered by an overwhelming intellectual curiosity and a grudging respect. The image of Captain Aris Thorn, calmly explaining how he had unraveled their ships without destroying them, had imprinted itself on the collective consciousness of the conclave. It was a stark reminder of their profound ignorance regarding humanity's true capabilities. The human diplomatic vessel, the Ambassadorial Dawn, was a sleek, unassuming craft, devoid of visible weapon emplacements, yet radiating a field of subtle, barely perceptible energy that made every Zalosian sensor hum with complex, unreadable data. It docked with the neutral station with an almost ethereal grace. The first humans to disembark were not military personnel, nor were they heavily armed. They were a small group, led by a serene woman designated diplomatic envoy Lyra Vance, accompanied by Captain Thorn himself, and a small retinue of what appeared to be scientists and cultural specialists. Their attire was simple, functional, and utterly alien in its understated elegance. High Elder Thuron, accompanied by Ambassador Rylos and Senator Gorok, met them in the station's primary diplomatic chamber. Subconsul Velara, though present, kept a wary distance, his multiple eyes constantly scanning for any perceived threat, his posture radiating suspicion. The chamber, designed for tense negotiations, felt strangely intimate under the calm, steady gaze of Envoy Vance. High Elder Thuron, Vance began, her voice a melodic counterpoint to Thorn's deeper tones, translated perfectly into the Zalosian harmonic. It is an honor to initiate formal diplomatic relations between the Zalosian hegemony and the human confederacy. We come in peace and with a profound desire for mutual understanding and cooperation. Her words were boilerplate diplomacy, yet they carried a sincerity that disarmed even the most skeptical. Thuron returned the greeting, his voice resonating with a carefully modulated gravitas. Envoy Vance, Captain Thorn, the honor is ours. Your species has presented us with a singular challenge, one that has compelled us to reevaluate our understanding of the universe and our place within it. We are eager to learn. The subsequent days and weeks were filled with an intense, unprecedented exchange of information. The humans, with a candor that surprised their alien hosts, began to reveal the foundational principles of their technology and philosophy. They explained their coherence engines, which didn't merely propel vessels but subtly manipulated localized spacetime to achieve near-instantaneous translocation without the violent distortions of conventional FTL. They demonstrated their field harmonizers, not weapons, but devices capable of precisely tailoring energy signatures to interact with specific matter states, allowing for everything from advanced terraforming to, as Thorn had demonstrated, the non-destructive incapacitation of hostile systems. Our understanding of the universe, and thus our technology, stems from a core belief, Envoy Vance explained during one of their many joint scientific sessions. Her words were projected across a vast holographic display, showing intricate models of quantum mechanics and gravitational fields. We believe that all existence is fundamentally interconnected through a universal energetic lattice. Every particle, every wave, every thought, every consciousness, all are nodes within this cosmic tapestry. Our science, our technology, our very philosophy, is dedicated to understanding and interacting with this lattice in a way that promotes harmony and growth, rather than disruption and decay. Senator Gorok, his pragmatic mind struggling with the abstract cons. PTS interjected, Envoy, this energetic lattice you speak of. It sounds less like science and more like mysticism. Our physics are based on observable, quantifiable forces. Where is the quantifiable data for this lattice? Thorn, who had largely remained silent during the more philosophical discussions, now stepped forward. Senator, The quantifiable data is in the results. Our ability to traverse vast distances without generating detectable warp signatures, our capacity to neutralize hostile vessels without kinetic impact, our medical advancements that regenerate tissue at a cellular level using subtle resonant frequencies. These are all empirically verifiable outcomes of interacting with this foundational principle. Your current scientific instruments are simply not calibrated to detect the subtle energy fluctuations of the lattice itself, only its macroscopic manifestations. He projected an image of a human-designed diagnostic scan, incredibly complex, displaying minute gravitational ripples and quantum entanglements within seemingly empty space. Imagine a vast ocean. Your ships observe the waves, the currents, the depths. Our vessels are designed to interact with the water molecules themselves, understanding the fundamental properties that create the waves and currents. We don't just sail on the ocean, we subtly influence its very composition. The Cathar scientists, initially skeptical, were utterly captivated. Their own attempts to model the human engagement had always hit a wall of theoretical impossibility. Now, presented with a different framework, a different set of foundational principles, the impossible began to coalesce into a terrifying, yet awe-inspiring possibility. The laws of space combat, they thought they knew, were indeed, as the title suggested, rewritten. But it was not a mere tactical adjustment. It was a wholesale intellectual revolution. Valera, however, remained unconvinced. He saw potential weapons, not philosophical insights. If your technology can unravel a ship, Envoy, can it also unravel a planet? A star? What prevents you from simply dismantling any civilization that displeases you? His multiple eyes narrowed, betraying his deep-seated distrust. Envoy Vance met his gaze, her expression unperturbed. Subconsul, the capacity to do harm is inherent in any advanced understanding of fundamental forces. A stone can be a tool or a weapon. The difference lies in intent, in philosophy, in the ethical framework that guides a species. Humanity has, through its own tumultuous history, learned the devastating cost of unchecked power. Our current scientific and technological paradigm is inextricably linked to a profound ethical commitment to non-aggression and the preservation of sentient life. To unravel a planet would be to unravel a part of the cosmic tapestry, an act abhorrent to our core principles. We seek balance, not dominion. This concept of an advanced species choosing restraint, choosing ethical limitations despite possessing godlike power, was profoundly alien to the Vikar. Their civilization was built on the principle that power, once acquired, must be wielded without hesitation. This human philosophy of self-imposed ethical boundaries on power was both baffling and, to Valera, unnervingly dangerous. It felt like a weakness that could be exploited. Yet he could not deny the undeniable evidence of their capabilities. Rylos, on the other hand, found immense resonance with the human philosophy. The Eldrin, who sought harmony in all things, saw in humanity's integrated understanding a reflection of their own spiritual pursuits, but amplified by a scientific rigor they had not achieved. Envoy Vance, Captain Thorne, your species' journey from internal conflict to this profound ethical stance is truly remarkable. How did you bridge such a vast philosophical chasm within your own history? Thorne, his eyes briefly distant as if contemplating centuries of human struggle, replied, Ambassador, it was a long, arduous path, marked by immense suffering and repeated failures. We learned through the hard lessons of self-destruction that true progress lies not in conquering the external, but in mastering the internal. We realized that our capacity for empathy and our drive for knowledge were our greatest strengths. It was a conscious, collective decision, fueled by the near annihilation of our own homeworlds, to reprioritize our existence. We chose to focus on understanding, on growth, and on seeking harmony with the universe, rather than merely extracting resources or dominating others. This was the large-scale reveal the Zalosians had been awaiting. Humanity wasn't just technologically advanced, they were philosophically evolved. Their unique understanding of the universe wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a deeply ingrained cultural and ethical commitment. Their technology was merely an extension of their worldview, their rewrite of the laws of Sea combat was not a mere tactical innovation. It was a reflection of their very definition of existence. It was a commitment to a paradigm of interaction that sought not victory through destruction, but resolution through fundamental understanding and manipulation. The dialogue extended for many more cycles, delving into human art, history, and scientific endeavors. The Zalosians, particularly Thuron and Rylos, found themselves constantly challenged, constantly expanding their own intellectual horizons. Humanity's approach to everything from disease eradication to energy generation was based on principles of interconnectedness and subtle influence, rather than brute force. They learned that human cities were not just structures, but vast, integrated ecosystems that drew energy from the very planetary magnetic fields, recycling matter at a molecular level. Their concept of a ship was not merely a vessel to traverse space, but a precisely tuned instrument to interact with the spatial medium itself, an extension of the pilot's consciousness. The conclave in subsequent sessions was no longer debating how to defend against humanity, but how to integrate with them. The initial fear of the unknown had slowly given way to a profound sense of awe and a nascent hope. The possibility of an alliance, of sharing in humanity's unique understanding, began to take root. Even Valera, though still deeply suspicious, found his arguments for aggression increasingly difficult to justify in the face of such overwhelming evidence of a benevolent, yet overwhelmingly powerful species. He simply couldn't rationalize fighting against something that could unmake his ships with a thought, yet consistently offered peace. As the discussions shifted towards formalizing an alliance, an unforeseen event rippled through the station's deep space sensor arrays. It was faint, barely discernible beneath the cosmic background radiation, but it was there. A repeating, patterned energy signature originating from the uncharted void beyond the galactic core. It was ancient, incredibly so, judging by the decay signature of its propagation. Their previous long-range scans had dismissed it as a localized gravitational anomaly, or perhaps a dying star's last gasp. The human scientists, however, reacted immediately. "Envoy High Elder," a human astrogator stated, his voice calm but urgent, "our deep scan arrays are picking up a resonance pattern from the galactic fringe. A signature previously cataloged by your archives as background anomaly 7 Theta, correct?" Thuron, startled by the human's immediate recognition, confirmed. "Indeed, an ancient, persistent signal. We have studied it for centuries, but deemed it natural cosmic background noise. Its complexity defied algorithmic interpretation." Thorne stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the faint, repeating signal. "It is not background noise, High Elder. It is a highly compressed, multi-layered data burst, a warning, and it is emanating from a region of space that aligns with a predicted vector for a cyclical cosmic event humanity has been tracking for millennia." The human specialists, working with their Zalosian counterparts, deployed a new generation of human data compression algorithms and pattern recognition matrices, something far beyond anything the Conclave had conceived. The faint, chaotic signal began to resolve itself. Mathematical patterns emerged. Linguistic structures, encoded in a universal language of physics and stellar cartography, became clear. The message, once decoded, sent a wave of chilling dread through the entire station. It was a desperate plea, a final testament from an unimaginably ancient civilization, far older than any species known to the Conclave. It spoke of a cosmic threat, an entity referred to as the Void Weaver. Not a species, not a fleet, but a pervasive entropic force of pure, conscious energy that periodically awoke from its deep slumber in the intergalactic void. It traversed sectors, consuming all forms of organized energy, all sentient thought, all complex matter. It was a fundamental force of universal dissolution, drawn to the very order that life and civilizations created. The message described its cyclical awakenings, its slow, inexorable advance, leaving behind vast, sterile voids where once vibrant galaxies had thrived. Its last awakening had been millions of years ago, consuming the ancient civilization that now sent this warning. Their final, desperate act, before being absorbed into the Void Weaver's consuming maw, had been to encode this message, compress it to the absolute limit of physical possibility, and project it across the void, hoping it would one day reach a species capable of understanding. And now, according to their calculations and the deciphered message, the Void Weaver was reawakening. Its predicted trajectory placed it squarely on a collision course with their quadrant of the galaxy, the very hoe. Me of the Zalosian hegemony and the newly discovered human frontier. The timing was chillingly precise, aligning with humanity's own long-term astronomical predictions. The revelation plunged the diplomatic chamber into a stunned silence, far more profound than any fear of the human anomaly had caused. All previous conflicts, all past anxieties, all political posturing suddenly felt utterly meaningless. The perceived threat of humanity, the debates over their capabilities, the fear of their power, all of it evaporated in the face of a true, existential horror that dwarfed any species-level conflict. High Elder Thuron, his wisdom tested by countless crises, felt a cold dread seep into his very essence. This was not a problem that could be solved with diplomacy or superior firepower. This was a force of nature, a cosmic predator of unimaginable scale and power. His gaze, along with the gazes of Valera, Rylos, and Gorok, turned to Captain Aris Thorn and Envoy Lyra Vance. Humanity, once an unpredictable anomaly, then a powerful ally, now stood as potentially the only hope. "The laws of space combat you rewrote, Captain Thorn," Thuron finally stated, his voice a strained whisper. "Your understanding of coherence, of manipulating the fundamental fabric of reality, was this, in part, born from a long-term awareness of such a threat?" Thorn met his gaze, his calm eyes reflecting an ancient, profound understanding. High Elder, humanity has always sought to understand the deeper workings of the cosmos. Our progression from basic physics to a unified field theory to the manipulation of the universal energetic lattice was driven by a foundational philosophical inquiry into existence itself. We have theorized about entropic forces, about the natural decay of ordered systems on a cosmic scale, the Void Weaver. It is a manifestation of that deepest fear, a primal force of universal entropy. Our pathfinding technologies, our coherence drives, our non-destructive field harmonizers, they are all designed not just for exploration or defense against conventional threats, but for adaptability, for survival against the unimaginable. Envoy Vance stepped forward, her voice imbued with a newfound gravity. The message from the ancient civilizations spoke of a solution, a potential countermeasure, requiring a radical shift in galactic thinking. It requires not just technology, but a unified consciousness, a collective effort to generate a counter-entropic field, a beacon of complex, coherent energy to deter or even repel the Void Weaver. It requires species to transcend their individual fears and differences, to unite on a level never before attempted. The chamber, once a place of suspicion and political maneuvering, now resonated with a single, overwhelming truth. The universe was not merely a stage for the rise and fall of civilizations. It held a darkness so profound that it rendered all petty squabbles irrelevant. And in this terrifying revelation, humanity, with its seemingly chaotic history, its bewildering contradictions, and its unique, profound understanding of the cosmos, stood poised not just as a powerful new species, but as a potential guide. The fight for galactic order had suddenly become a desperate, unified struggle for existence itself. The Conclave, now truly united, looked to the quiet strength of Captain Aris Thorn, the serene logic of Envoy Lyra Vance, and the boundless, adaptable spirit of humanity as the uncertain future stretched before them, a future demanding a unity forged in the face of true cosmic terror. The stars, once a playground, now held the promise of ultimate oblivion and the desperate, profound hope for an unimaginable, unified survival. The silent, powerful fight for existence had truly just begun.